seeing the difference in how patients were treated, and based on nothing else other than their skin tone. Also, if she wants to be a stripper when she grows up, that'll be fine. And he walked out the door. And, you tell me that I can't do something, that's like, don't believe me, just watch kind of situation. We don't have any, we didn't have any doctors in our family, so I was the first to go to medical school. And the doctor-patient relationship is built on trust, because there's some people who think that it's just sadness, and they're like, just snap out of it. And, depression is not that. It just, they just feel so guilty that they are not more grateful. But it's, it's depression, and it's treatable. Everyone is at risk, and it does cross, economic and social and racial and every kind of barrier that is. And especially right now, as we're going through the pandemic, we've seen increase in depression, we've seen increase in suicide rates, unfortunately. So it's really important that we understand our risk.
Awesome. So I believe we first met 2 years ago at a summit in Chicago for DPC. And I know that one of the first questions that we always have for guests is, tell us a little bit about your background, about your childhood. How did young Delicia grow up, and what made her become a doctor?
So I was always one of those kids. I knew I either wanted to be a doctor, a teacher, or a lawyer, or a hotel manager. That just kind of like got in there as well. And I found out that if I became a doctor, I could do all of those except for the hotel management piece. I could teach, my patients. I could teach medical students. I could advocate for my patients, which is the part of law that I really was drawn to. And then obviously I could heal people. And so I was really drawn into medicine. And I shared that, I had a somewhat negative experience that really shaped the type of doctor I wanted to be. So I was taking a shower one day in the 7th grade, and I noticed a lump in my breast. And at first I was kind of okay with it because I've never been the most voluptuous woman. I thought, if I get one on the other side, I'll be evened out. And that lasted for a few seconds. And then I got scared because I knew I would have to bare my chest in order to get anything done about it. I told my mom. We went to the doctor's office, waited hours in the waiting room before being brought back, and came into this cold blue room. And the doctor walks in, and I'm like, I want to be a doctor too, all enthusiastic. And he just looks at me over his glasses and says, "Take your top off." And I looked at my mom, and she nodded that it was okay. And he just walked over and just pressed on my chest and said, "It's probably a benign fibroadenoma. We won't know for sure until we have it surgically removed. And due to the location, the scar should be small. So if she wants to be a stripper when she grows up, that'll be fine." And he walked out the door. And I was devastated, but it was in that minute that I decided that when I became a doctor, I was going to be the type of doctor that I wish I had.
Wow. Did you have any medical professionals in your family or in your circle of acquaintances?
No. If we had a family business, it would actually be the mortuary services. So I tell people I work really hard not to support the family business. So we don't have any, we didn't have any doctors in our family, so I was the first to go to medical school.
Can I just rewind back a little? There is so much to unpack in that whole situation that happened. One, speaking language that, is to a child that even a grown adult wouldn't understand. The invasion of private, there's so much that happened, just not having, I don't know how you would call it, but like bedside manners, even though you weren't bedside, but just that empathy and understanding for who you're dealing with. And then the other side of it, of course, is health disparities, or just the treatment of being Black and brown, and we're considered to have a higher pain tolerance or to be over exaggerating all the time. And I'm sure that shaped the way as well of what you wouldn't do for yourself. I just had to speak to that because it's so much in one situation that marks, because these kinds of things are traumatizing.
And absolutely. I saw health disparities from a young age, not only with my own experience, but then obviously going through medical school and seeing it seeing the difference in how patients were treated, and based on nothing else other than their skin tone. And sometimes people weren't even aware of it. So there's that unconscious bias that exists also. But in my situation, I was in seventh grade. The doctor, I know he had a ton of patients, which doesn't excuse his behavior at all. But I think when people are in that mode, in that assembly line medicine, where it's just like you're booked solid, there's no time for you to breathe, that it makes it very difficult for you to be your best self, which again, I don't think he was at all. But I've had friends even that, after a long day will say, gosh, I really wish I'd spent some more time with this patient, or that I should have explained this better. And they're just under the gun. And so it's not about how good of a doctor you are, it's how good are you in 5 minutes. In the system, which is, one of the reasons you met me at the direct primary care conference, because I refused to practice that way.
So you, instead of running away from the medical field, you ran towards it. And I have heard I've heard you're an amazing speaker and an amazing author, and you absolutely are an advocate and a healer and an author. So it's amazing that you're able to do all of those things that you wanted to do.
When I decided I wanted to be a doctor, there was nothing he could have done that would have dissuaded me. If anything, you tell me that I can't do something, that's like, don't believe me, just watch kind of situation. Sometimes we find a doctor that we emulate, and they're so great, you want to be just like them. Other times you find a doctor that you're like, I want to be the exact opposite of you. and that was that moment. It was like, okay, well, when I become a doctor, I'm not going to make my patients wait for hours. I'm not going to speak to them in words that they don't understand. If they have a question after they leave, I'm going to be accessible, because none of that was afforded to us at that moment. And so even when I left and I started my own practice, which at first was a regular insurance-based fee-for-service practice, and in 2014 I got a contract from the area's largest insurance company with a 40% cut to how much they were going to pay us. And I knew that, like, basically I was working for them. When someone could make a decision that literally put me out of business, like, I wasn't working for myself or my patients, I was working for them. And that's when I started to make that transition to direct primary care, even though at the time I was clinically depressed. And it was, that seventh grade self, she just kind of keeps coming up every now and then and saying, this is not what we said we were going to do. And I think that's important for us to all be able to look in the mirror and be proud of the person that is staring back at us.
I have a question, Dr. Delicia. I hear very often from people in the Black community that they have to work twice as hard to reach their goals. And I was wondering, becoming a doctor is already super, super hard. Did you feel the same on your way to becoming a doctor? Was that still true for you?
It definitely was, and there's also that just kind of added weight of feeling like you're representing the entire race. So when I was in medical school, and there were not very many, Black students, I took a year off my second year of medical school to be treated for depression, and it was the best decision I had ever made. But it was also a really hard decision because I was concerned about a lot of things, and one of them was, is this going to affect other people who look like me getting in, or is this going to, of course, I was in my best state of mind at the time, but I had all of these concerns about how it was going to look and impact both my career and, like, the people around me. Because I've always been a mentor, I've always been, a mentee. So definitely that existed. And even now, I have a patient every now and then who I don't look like who they expected to walk in the door. They didn't expect to see this girl with braids coming in. And the doctor-patient relationship is built on trust. So if someone has a big problem with trusting, then it's like, I'm probably not the doctor for you, because there's certain things about me that are never going to change. So that's kind of on them. But it took me a while to get to that place in my career where I was, not trying to prove myself and prove this, and just really, it's like, I've studied really hard. I know I'm good. And like, if you can't see it, then go see somebody else.
I admire you so much because there's so much you had to push through and really persevere with being a med student, and then obviously becoming a doctor, being highly melanated, being a woman, and the fact that you got treated for depression. I mean, you, and in some ways you don't represent the majority because of, as you talk about in your book, and the repercussions that can happen when you try to step up and speak forward. So I had a question about being that I believe you talk about how 30% of doctors have, they're more at risk, 30% more likely to die by suicide than the regular population, and that women doctors are 140% more likely. I believe, if I haven't mistaken, that actually Black women have a lower rate to die by suicide and when compared to the regular population. How does that factor in? Do you know anything about med students or doctors or Black women who are in the field? Because I don't know if that statistic moves or if it stays the same or changes. But if we already have so much pressure to not come forward and talk about anxiety, depression, or any of these other symptoms and signs, then what happens then? Or maybe I'm just completely off.
No, and the hard thing about the statistics is that there's not a lot of studies that go that far into breaking down, deaths by suicide amongst physicians and then doing it by race. So even the studies that we have on physician suicide are limited. Dr. Eva Schernhammer did a meta-analysis that was one of the largest ones at the time, and that's where the statistic about male doctors being 40% higher than the general population, female doctors being approximately 130% plus higher than women in general, comes from. And we really don't know as far as as what the breakdown is when you take that already piece of the population and then try to divvy that out by race as well, because Black people make up about 2% of the of the medical community or the physician community.
I get it.
But it is important. I think that it's really important that we continue to study it and get that information forward.
I absolutely agree. Maybe I have a vested special interest, obviously, because of my bias. But I still think that you're absolutely a light for, just like your book, The Dawn, being a light for med students when they're going through. I want to gift my brother who he graduated from dental school, but I'm sure that there's still a lot of information that he doesn't have. You talk about how you don't walk into med school hearing any of these statistics, so you're just kind of left open and vulnerable. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this talk for National Suicide Prevention Month, so that people were just a little bit more clued in and they had some help with signs and symptoms and what kind of, next steps would be, or anything like that. And that's kind of what I was thinking.
But I'm curious, as a doctor, how can you help with people who are at risk to be suicidal?
So I do encourage you to read the book, but
I will.
Yeah. So and actually, even though the book is really it's focused toward medical students, a lot of my patients have read the book, and they learn a lot more about depression, because there's this idea that depression is a character flaw instead of being a chemical thing.
Right.
And especially amongst people of faith, who are sometimes the hardest community for me to treat, because there's so much to kind of overcome. And so I definitely want to talk about like suicide, but definitely just talking about what depression is, because there's some people who think that it's just sadness, and they're like, just snap out of it. And depression is not that. So sadness is part of it, but it's not something that just, happens for a few days. It's you've, had for at least 2 weeks, you've had basically 9 different symptoms or 5 of the 9 symptoms of depression. One of those being that, you're being sadness and being, loss of interest in things that you usually enjoy doing. But there's other symptoms as well. So some people will start to eat a lot, and they'll eat a lot of comfort foods. And other people won't take care of themselves because in order to take care of yourself, you have to have a feeling of self-worth. And they will stop eating altogether. And so, just changes in their appetite, changes in sleep patterns, so sleeping too much or not sleeping enough can be, some of those signs. Loss of energy definitely is one of the hallmarks of depression. Difficulty in concentration, which obviously as a medical student, that's not conducive to being able to study and to be able to perform, or for anyone who's working. And so those types of things: depressed mood, frequent mood swings. Some people might cry a lot. Some people just, there's things that they usually let kind of roll off their back really bother them, and feeling guilty and blaming, feeling hopeless. And then also the one that we get most concerned about is when you have those thoughts about self-harm and, having suicidal thoughts. So, I think it's really important for people to understand that depression is just not I'm going through, I just broke up with someone and for 2 days I'm crying. That the sadness is a normal human emotion. Depression is a really serious mood disorder, and left untreated, 15% of those individuals will go on to, die by suicide. So it's really important to step in.
And that can come out of the blues, right? Like completely unexpected. For anyone is at risk for that to happen.
And that's really important, because some of my patients especially will say, like, I don't have a reason to be depressed. Like, I'm making good money, I've got a great relationship. And the guilt part of depression, which is, again, one of those signs and symptoms, they really feel that, because, and especially if they're from the community of faith, they just feel so guilty that they are not more grateful. But it's depression, and it's treatable. And I think that's the most important message, is that most people get better with treatment. And, taking that break in medical school, even though it was a hard decision to make, and after I did it, we actually had 5 deaths in my family back to back. And when other people asked about the break, they said she had 5 deaths in her family, and then she got depressed. Well, that was not the order that it happened in. But I let them believe that, because I felt like I have to have a reason. I have to have a bigger reason than this. So I think it's really important to recognize that everyone is at risk, and it does cross economic and social and racial and every kind of barrier that is. And especially right now, as we're going through the pandemic, we've seen increase in depression, we've seen increase in suicide rates, unfortunately. So it's really important that we understand our risk.
But also that brings us to the point of why it's really important to have a primary care physician who's able to advocate for you, who's able to look for a specialist for you, to understand, okay, that there's mental health services that you could benefit from, because you work with them one-on-one and you're able to spend time with them, and they're able to have access to you, which does not happen in the traditional system. I mean, if we can't really go to you and you don't understand who we are, then it's really hard to know, break past all of those barriers and the stigma and everything that you just mentioned, because they're not able to have that kind of relationship with you. So have you seen your patients benefit in that way, where you're able to extend more care to them because you have a closer relationship? I mean, it may seem like the answer is obvious, but I just wanted to know how, for you, that may have changed, and also if that's what you were looking for when you came into moving away from the traditional care system and then moving into DPC, direct primary care.
Absolutely. So my move to direct primary care, yes, it's in line with the way that I wanted to practice medicine, being able to spend more time with patients, and, patients being able to get in, sooner and understand what's going on with them, and really build that doctor-patient relationship. So I wanted that, and I also wanted time to take care of myself. So in my previous, practice, I was taking care of everybody else, but there was no time for me to do any of the self-care that I knew to do. Like, I knew what to do. I just didn't have the time to do it. And a lot of physicians are in that same situation. So my move to direct primary care was both, there were business sides for it, and then there were a ton of personal things that I was looking for that I've been able to get, that now I truly get to know my patients in a way that I, didn't know them before. It opened up time for me to do things like write a book. That story has been in me for years. But it wasn't until I did this move that it opened up the time for me to actually talk about this other passion of mine. And in so doing, and I sent an email to all of my patients because, the subject line was, I want you to hear this from me first, because I recognize, like, they don't know that I've had this history. They don't know that I took time off to be treated. And I want them to hear that from me, not from, some news source or whatever. And after doing that, and after really just sharing my story more, which the unfortunate reality is that happened after losing one of my best friends to suicide. And I realized at that moment that my silence wasn't helping anybody. But I started talking more about it. And so I've got patients now who have been patients of mine for years. But now they opened up about their own mental health issues. I've got patients who now will come in and they will come in and just make a mental health visit. And whereas before it was kind of like they were coming in for depression or diabetes or something else, and then there was like this, oh, by the way. Or I would kind of pick up on it and, have them do like the Beck's depression inventory, which is one of the inventories that I love, because it's just, it's very easy, and it's questions that you don't think to ask yourself. And it can really help to kind of like pull out depression in someone who doesn't even know that they're at risk. But definitely the move to direct primary care was helpful both for my patients and for me.
Well, I want to take a moment really to acknowledge also this testament to someone really working hard to achieving a hard goal on her way to become a doctor, and then there's depression. And you took a step back and took care of yourself. So this is really the real life situation of the fact that life is not always linear. It's okay to take a step back. It's okay to take a break and then look up and continue on your way. And I think that is very commendable, and we need to repeat that here, that you are a living testament to that being possible. Because I know a lot of people, they just think success is always linear, and when you have to take a curve, that kind of invalidates what they were doing, and that is not the case. So I wanted to state that. I also wanted to ask you, because we as a firm that try to do marketing for direct primary care, we often have this problem. Well, how do we describe in layman's terms what DPC, direct primary care, is? And I'm very curious to hear how you explain that in simple terms, because we're assuming here right now that everybody knows what that means.
And then after you say that, I'm going to say my aha moment of why I understand why you went into it for other people.
Awesome. So to answer your question, it's kind of like, how do I explain direct primary care? And oftentimes I just, I draw the distinction of, what it is not. So unlike traditional visits, direct primary care patients oftentimes will get same or next day appointments. They get longer one-on-one time with their doctor. They get virtual visits, which now is a thing, but it's something that direct primary care doctors were doing all along. And it's done through a monthly membership. So it's done through an innovative monthly membership. There's no copays, there's no deductibles, there's no insurance hassles. It's just the healthcare that you need when and where you need it, simplified.
Yeah, I like that.
So my aha moment of why you went into not only into direct primary care, but helping other doctors get into direct primary care is because you really are an advocate, and you're like telling other doctors like, hey, you don't have to lose your mental peace for spending all your time fighting to get paid. with insurance, you know, you can actually take care of yourself. You can practice medicine the way you've always wanted to. You can have access with your patients, like directly. You can give better quality of care because you're taking care of yourself. So, because it's not the case that everyone who gets into direct primary care then wants to be an entrepreneur for getting other doctors into primary care, direct primary care. But you're saving people from leaving medicine altogether because they're so burnt out. And it's like, it all made sense once I heard you. I'm listening to you. Having this conversation is really good. And then also I remember, well, I'll stop there. I have one more thing that I want to say it after. I'm too excited.
And that is totally completely true. Like when you see because when I talk about depression and I talk about overcoming depression, the reason that I've been able to do that and to do all the things that I need to do to maintain my own mental health is because I changed my lifestyle. I changed how I worked. And when we talk about the difference between like burnout and depression, burnout is it's used more in HR circles because it's considered kind of more work related, but it has a lot of it's distinct from depression, but does have some overlap. But that depersonalization and being demoralized, like having to practice medicine outside of your values. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people like myself, medicine is a calling. So it's part of what you're meant to do. So if you feel like you have to do it, and so you can still do it, and you can do it a different way. And you don't have to sacrifice your own mental health to do it. You don't have to sacrifice your family to do it. So I love that. In 2017-18, my mother was sick. She had stage 4 uterine carcinosarcoma, and I was able to be there with her, fly back and forth, be by her side as she was dying, and never worry about the business. And my patients, I would talk to them when I was up in Kentucky. And if I had been in my previous model, where I had to physically come to the office to see me for me to, file a claim and, get paid, even though I could probably take care of it over the phone anyway, I would have, it would have been harder to do that and have the peace of mind that I had on the business front. Personal front is a whole different story. But, I think being able to help other doctors achieve that, to be able to have a practice that's profitable and it's personally fulfilling is amazing. And it was last summer that I started really, going and coaching other doctors and kind of making that transition. But my ulterior motive has always been about, personal development and, mental health, and but making space for it. And so one of the ways you can make space for it is, doing that transition.
Now you bring up a good point. I know that your education to become a doctor is certainly not, they don't prepare you to be a business person, essentially. But if you choose to go that route of DPC, you need to be business savvy. And it's interesting that you mentioned you coach other doctors to go the same way. What are the biggest challenges and the biggest learning curves for a doctor that wants to go that route?
Well, there's several. But I think, mindset is probably the biggest one. So just understanding that, that all the skill and all the experience that you trained with, it's yours. And the reason that someone's willing to pay you 6 figures is because you're probably worth 7. So, that you can go off and do that for yourself. And we've gotten so used to being demoralized by administrators and all these people who say, like, you can't do this. Like, if you're smart enough to make it through medical school, you can run a business. Now, there needs to be some boundaries, and you definitely have to make sure that from a business savvy standpoint that, you even though you're billing monthly, if people aren't, paying, you do have to honor their decision to leave and, make sure that you've got a discharge process and, all of those things. But, I think really it's just that the mindset, because you get beat down for so long in medical training. And, then you go out and you get this job and, some administrator says, like, oh, you only have this many RVUs and it's very demoralizing. So understand like their value, and like especially as a primary care physician, they are always trying to say like, oh, you're replaceable. We're just gonna hire a nurse, and this, this, that, and the other. And it's like, understand your power and understand like everything that you train for, you own. It's it's yours, and no one can take that away from you, and you can make a business for yourself.
Now, marketing-wise, since we are always thinking about that, what has worked best for you? Are you doing it on your own? Maybe at the beginning you did, and now you have help. What part of marketing do you actually enjoy, and how do you approach it? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I'm not the most extroverted person, so but I there's a whole idea that your love has to be more than your fear, and so I did make sure that I understood who is my ideal patient. So I love taking care of small business owners. If you have the guts to go out there and start your own business and the moxie to do it, then those are just people I love supporting and taking care of. They treat their employees like family, and we're just a really good match. So I make sure that I was physically present at a lot of the events where small business owners would be present, and given the opportunity to present on any topic, I would just make sure that I mention somewhere in there about how we work and what we're able to do, and then following up with people. So that's what I did kind of pre-COVID. And then, so back when we were seeing people in person, and then, since then, doing more, kind of online, and, just finding different ways to connect with people.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned something that seems rather obvious, but that I observe people don't get. When you said that you go to where your audience is, that is really a simple idea, but for a lot of business owners, hard to understand, because what they will do, they will spend most of their time networking with their own. And that's nice, there's a place for that. You need to exchange ideas, you need to mastermind, but you also need to go into a room where you are the only person who can provide the service. So I really like that one, yeah.
And it's also the only way that you find out what they want. Because I'm the expert at what I do, but I'm not the expert at what my patient wants.
Yeah.
And we have to find that intersection. So yes, a lot of my friends will spend a lot of time in all the direct primary care Facebook groups and all of that, which is fantastic, and it's really supportive. But when it comes down to who you're actually serving, I do have a lot of physician clients, but the majority of my patients are not. And so it's important to go out there and not wait for someone to darken my doorstep. We are in the community. I love being in the community. I always wanted to be a community doctor. And oftentimes we'll go out to the businesses and we'll do presentations there so their employees have a chance to see us and know that they can trust us. So they feel more comfortable, coming to the office.
And you built up quite some following on Instagram. Did that happen organically, or did you have a strategy behind that?
So one of my friends, Dr. Lauren Powell, just joined, and she's amazing. So a lot of it was networking, surrounding myself by people who are inspirational, who helped me become more extroverted, and to get my message out there, who challenge me and invite me to do things that I might be scared to do at first, but that I know that it's in line with what I'm supposed to do in the world. So definitely who you hang around matters, and making sure that you are surrounding yourself with people who are always making you stand on your tippy toes and pushing you forward. And it's interesting that you say that, because I don't think that I have a very large following. But it's also kind of staying out of that comparison mode, because definitely when it comes to mental health, getting into comparison doesn't help. And that's definitely one of the downsides of this kind of this social media culture, and everyone kind of showing their highly curated, backgrounds in their lives. That it's really easy for people to get into comparison. And we're all unique. We all have our unique gifts and talents, and it's really about just really kind of honing those in, and what your assignment is to do, and doing that, helping other people get to where they need to be, because you're always going to win if you help other people win. So that's what I always try to do, is just think of how can I connect someone with someone, and that whole that saying that the rising tide lifts all boats. So just really helping to do that.
Dr. Delicia, I'm so happy that we met in the summit, and I mean, I'm still fangirling. I'm so excited.
That's okay. While you are doing that, I will ask Dr. Haynes, what does your future look like in 5 years, 10 years?
So one of the reasons that I went into direct primary care was for my personal life. Having time to date, and having time to, I love spending time with my extended family. And I'm, looking forward to, kind of having my own. And so making space for that has been a priority, and doing that. So that's definitely one of the things. Again, continuing to help other doctors with this transition, helping other doctors making direct primary care the norm, rather than, this thing that a very few number of physicians are doing. Continuing patient care, but also continuing to do it outside the walls of Family First Health Center. Just shining the light that I know I'm meant here to do.
That's awesome. Well, you were so
See,
genuine.
Andrea, you're not alone. Dr. Lauren is a friend
I
too.
saw
Yeah.
that. But you're so genuine. You're so real. I think you are the perfect person to actually, truly, really want your primary care colleagues to get into, to join in the DPC world. Like one of our clients says, the DPC bug bit you. So I think you're the perfect person to do that, because you can tell that it's coming from a place of really wanting everyone to have that space. And I thank you so much for the White Coat Safe Space Initiative, for your book, The Dawn. Can you tell everyone about what you're doing, and where they can find your information, where they can purchase your book? If they're like us, they're going to the HINT Summit to hear you speak some more next week, and I think they can still sign up and register for that too. But go ahead and let us know.
Absolutely, yeah. So the HINT Summit, it's hint.com/events, and you can still sign up to go there. I'm speaking, I believe, Thursday at 3 Eastern. Finishing up my slides for that now. And so that's one place. You can follow me across social media at Dr. Delicia MD, and that's DrDeliciaMD. My website is drdeliciamd.com, and that's where you can find the book, The Dawn, A Roadmap to Finding a Light in Your Darkest Hour. You can find some of our wellness wear. So I have the White Coat Safe Space band that I gave out at the conference. Because it's nice. Sometimes you don't know what to say when someone is struggling, and sometimes it's nice to be able to just kind of take something like this off, and maybe put your phone number on it and just leave it on their desk. And so it says white coat safe space on one side, white coat brave space on the other, and the other it says Yana, which stands for You Are Not Alone. So it's just a beautiful message that you can share with people. So both the book and the wellness wear is at that site, the drdeliciamd.com site.
Awesome. Well, we will make sure to put all the references in the comments. We'll also send out an email with the recording of this conversation to our network. And I am sure we will meet in this paradigm of DPC. And we, as Shanks Web Development, wish you lots of continued luck and success. And thank you again so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.